I received a text message from an unfamiliar number. "Congratulations on selling the house," it stated. My heart stopped. I hadn't made any sales. However, when verifying the address, Grandpa's house was the location. My early years, the only place I feel safe. Lost. Behind my back, sold. Please remember to subscribe to Family and Story, use the like button, and leave a comment below if this tale of betrayal, silent strength, and the legacy of love speaks to you. Let me now explain how everything fell apart. I was the silent one all the time. The one who remained silent. The one who stayed in the living room after dinner to do the dishes while the others joked. I wasn't ostentatious or noisy. I didn't pursue titles or degrees. All I did was paint. Maybe that's why when I vanished into myself, no one noticed. The name Emily Fairbanks is mine. At the age of 31, I work as an art teacher at a tiny public high school a few towns away. I choose to live a simple life. I like that my clothes are older than most of my students, and my apartment is little. I don't require much. I didn't. Things were never what I needed. I required affection. A sense of belonging. Someone who caught sight of me. Grandpa Walter was that someone. He saw me even though he wasn't flawless. He would put up a folding easel in the sunroom every Friday afternoon, take out 2 paintbrush jars and say, "All right, Em." He would never correct me, "So let's see what color your week was." Never tell me that my people are too thin or my sky is too gloomy. Simply nodding, he would add, "That's how you felt." Excellent. Grandpa was losing it, according to my parents who told me he was becoming too slow and too soft when I was 16. However, he simply seemed more compassionate and present to me. I so began to hang out with him on the weekends. I made up reasons telling my folks that I was studying or working additional hours. In reality, I was merely sitting next to him while he prepared his tea, the way Grandma always did, slowly and deliberately, as though the custom itself held her near. There were no other visitors. Not at all. He talked too much about the past, they said, that he babbled, that it was depressing. However, each story he shared with me felt like a thread that bound me together. I was holding his hand as he passed. He was seeing the maple tree in the yard through the window. His final remarks lacked depth. "Keep the light in the studio," he simply replied. "Don't allow them to close the curtains." It took me 3 months to figure out what he meant. Just before I poured my morning coffee at 7:12 a.m., I received the text. I spilled half the pot because my hands were shaking. I clicked on the message's address. It was there. Sycamore Lane, 1873. Grandpa's home. It is marked as sold. I had not been informed. Nothing. Not a gathering. Not a conversation. The will reading makes no mention of it. Simply gone. I gave my mom a call. She responded over the speaker. "Em, I was going to give you a call." "Why has Grandpa sold his house?" A pause. Then, as if he was simply waiting for me to call, my father's voice interrupted. "Because the time had come. Emily, we can't wait around forever. You weren't actually doing anything with it." I refrained from screaming. I was unable to. I felt a vice-like tightness in my throat. I muttered, "It wasn't yours to sell." Too quietly, Mom said, "Sweetheart, you take these things too personally. Let's proceed, shall we?" Suddenly it was finished. I wasn't asked. Nobody gave a damn. Like a scrawl on a chalkboard, they had erased my past. However, they had overlooked something. Grandpa left something behind. It was going to break everything, but they missed it. I wish I could say I felt inferior to my own family for the first time that morning. In actuality, though, I've had that feeling for years. Perhaps decades. The golden one was usually my older brother Ryan. Sharp and loud, he was the kind that turned a room when he walked in. He majored in finance at NYU, dated the prom queen, and played varsity football. Even when he was mistaken, people nodded as he talked. He enjoyed luxuries: shiny watches, fast automobiles, and well-tailored outfits. He was the type of son my parents enjoyed flaunting at social gatherings. I recall bringing a sketch I had been working on for weeks to a Thanksgiving dinner years ago. A picture of Grandpa in his garden with the maple blossoms in the background. It might move them, I reasoned. Perhaps I reasoned they would notice anything in me this one time. As if it were a joke, Ryan held it up. It appears to be a Hallmark card. Are you selling these yet? Perhaps you can purchase a legitimate job. Everyone chuckled. All of them except Grandpa. You made the tree look kinder than it ever was, he said to me after examining the sketch as if it were a photograph. Your gift is that. He was not heard by anyone else. However, I did, and for years I clung to that moment. It was always like that. When Ryan spoke, people would adjust to his loud, reckless, and confident voice. People would look aside when I spoke, as if I had said something embarrassing in a whisper. Ryan seldom ever paid Grandpa a visit, even in his latter months. Grandpa offered him a cup of tea when he visited once, asking about stock options and the potential sale price of the house when the time comes. According to Ryan, he didn't consume old man water. 9 minutes later, he was gone. I counted, so I remember. 9 minutes. For him, that was what Grandpa meant. Nevertheless, Ryan managed to deliver the eulogy upon Grandpa's passing. It was all about Grandpa teaching us to invest in what matters: real estate knowledge and family legacy. While Mom grinned from the front pew as if he were accepting an award, I stood next to the coffin and watched my brother give a speech he didn't believe. I was not asked to speak. Nobody even gave me a glance. The primary characters in our family's story had already been determined. All I was scenery. Perhaps I shouldn't have been shocked to learn that the house was being sold. Money wasn't the only factor. It wasn't. Who got to matter was the issue. And I never really did to them. However, they overlooked something. Regarding Grandpa about me? Quiet does not imply weakness, and they forgot that. They also forget that Grandpa always had a rationale for whatever he did. That night, I was unable to sleep. He often referred to the sunroom as the heart of the house, and I was thinking about it as I sat on my floor surrounded by old sketchbooks. If they ever try to take it, just remember there's more written down than they know, he once said to me. I assumed it was simply another of his small puzzles at the moment. However, perhaps it wasn't. Perhaps the house was still there. Perhaps there was still something for me to discover. I was invited 3 days after that terrible text. My parents threw a family dinner at Lakeside Grill, which they exclusively used for extravagant events. Mother adored the gleaming silver, the white tablecloths, and the way the waiters addressed her as "Ma'am," as if she were a valued guest. I nearly skipped it. However, I felt the desire to see their faces, to find out if it was accurate, if in fact they had done it without even a glimmer of shame. Ryan was there when I got there, arms slung across the back of his chair, as if he owned the space. His fiancée, Sophie, sat next to him, grinning as if she knew no secrets, and he was wearing one of his fashionable jackets, the type he always said made people listen faster. With her pearls neatly positioned along her collarbone, Mom was enjoying a glass of wine. Dad's phone was scrolling. When I stepped in, nobody looked up. At last, my mother said, "Emily, you're running late." I sat down. I didn't respond. The atmosphere at the table seemed practiced, as if everyone had been waiting to contribute. Dad folded his hands like a CEO at a board meeting and said, "We wanted to talk about the house. We are aware that this has been a difficult period. However, it was the proper decision to sell." "For whom?" quietly I inquired. Ryan laughed. Don't be dramatic. You weren't actually residing there. You don't even pass by car. For a year, I painted the house on Saturdays, I said. I committed the changes in light across the porch to memory. As if she were removing lint from a sleeve, Mom interrupted. Which is lovely. But property tax is not paid by sentiment. I recognized then that they weren't only uninterested, they took pride in their accomplishments. Effective, realistic, chilly. They genuinely thought that I was the child still holding on to memories like they were furniture, and that they had done the grown-up thing. Bless her, Sophie appeared uneasy. She inquired as to if I was still teaching in an attempt to shift the topic. I gave one nod. There was nothing more I wanted to give them. Then, with his elbows resting on the table, Ryan leaned forward and said the one thing that really got to me. You must comprehend, Em. Toward the end, Grandpa wasn't present. He spoke in great detail. Notes scribbled here and there. We won't take any of it seriously, you can be sure. My face was emptied of blood. Because I was aware that they had seen the note at that very moment. They had discovered something and rejected it, possibly a letter or a clause. Or concealed it, or both. I refrained from arguing. I didn't speak louder. I simply answered, You're right, Ryan, and gently folded my napkin. He did make scribbles. You will never comprehend certain things. With the main course half served and the pricey wine unopened, I got up and left. Behind me, I could hear my mother's gentle, almost pleading voice as I walked out into the chilly air. She's been overly sensitive all along. However, they were mistaken. I wasn't acting sentimentally. I was keeping quiet. Furthermore, there is a distinction. It took me a while to return home. I drove instead. There was no destination in sight, only meandering roads, headlights piercing the stillness, and hands holding the wheel a bit too firmly. Anger was not the cause of the pain in my chest. Not precisely. It was older than that. A sort of fatigue that makes its way into the bones. They would never see me the way Grandpa did, I knew in silence. I eventually found myself turning down Sycamore Lane without intending to. The house remained intact. It was, of course. The new owners had not yet moved in, but the documents had been signed. From the outside, nothing had changed. The shutters were still crooked, the porch swing was still a bit skewed, and there was the small crack in the chimney that Grandpa had never bothered to mend. I simply parked on the other side of the street and sat. The trees rustled in the breeze. Standing like a sentinel in the yard was that old maple now barren in the cold. The same one Grandpa used to rake every fall while I heaped leaves into unkempt mounds, and he hummed 1940s tunes. My chest constricted. This was too much for them to handle, not in this manner, not when it was so important. I drove back to the house early the following morning. However, I had a strategy this time. I had contacted the realtor and informed them that I needed to get a box of personal belongings that I had inadvertently left behind. I was given 15 minutes. I only needed that. I headed directly for the sunroom. Grandfather used to refer to it as the heart of the house. Dust had fallen on the shelves and the curtains were drawn, but the subtle aroma of lavender and linseed oil persisted. I walked to the old, built-in drawer beneath the window bench, my feet squeaking on the floors. Years ago, Grandpa used to tell me, check where the light hits first thing in the morning if someone ever makes you feel erased. That drawer is more intelligent than most people realize. Back then, it sounded like a joke. I got it now. When I opened it, I discovered a faded yellow envelope hidden behind an old paint pad. Dense. Sealed. He wrote my name in his calligraphy on the front. Emily, this is for you to remember who you are. Opening it made my fingers tremble. A notarized copy of an addition to his will was found within. One typed text with 2 signatures at the end, his as well as his attorney's. Without my granddaughter, Emily Fairbank's, full written approval, Any attempt to transfer ownership of 1873 Sycamore Lane within a year of my death will be null and void. This clause supersedes earlier division or sale-related provisions. It was there. He had buried a key for me in the chamber where we had previously painted sunsets in silence, not in a bank or safe. Then there was a letter underneath the legal form, written by hand. No greeting, no dates. On the paper, only his voice. They have lost the feeling if they move too quickly. You haven't. M, that's your burden, as well as your present. Don't allow them to cast doubt on it. There's more to this house than just walls. It's you. Let the law remind them who loved it the most if they decide to sell it. It took me a while to cry. I simply sat there and gazed out at the yard through the dusty window, at the tree, still swaying a little in the wind at the swing. It took 2 more hours to locate Grandpa's former attorney, Mr. Holloway. He had moved upstate to live in a small cottage. A little quiet internet research and an old newsletter from the neighborhood bar organization led me to him. He was taken aback by my message. However, his voice steadied when I told him what I had discovered. I recall that clause, he remarked. Walter was unyielding, claimed that you, not the court, had to hold it. Have you got the envelope? Yes. And the first page of the signature? Yes. Then it can be enforced. As simple as that. The transaction was null and void. In an instant, everything they believed they had done was undone. The one person Grandpa trusted most had been missing. And now, they were going to be held accountable. I took my time telling them. After I hung up with Mr. Holloway, a peculiar calmness descended upon me. Not victorious, not arrogant, just be quiet. It was as if the wind had shifted and I was now walking with it rather than against it. Out of clarity, not spite, I spent the following few days getting ready. I collected the letter, the envelope, and the notarized clause. Mr. Holloway consented to assist in submitting a motion to lawfully stop the transaction. He promised to take care of the paperwork. He even volunteered to take the calls. I told him no, though. I wanted to share it with them. Not out of rage, not to exact revenge, but so that this time they will remember my voice. That Saturday, they were hosting a small gathering at the house for an early holiday toast. Before the buyer formally took possession, they had invited some co-workers' acquaintances and even Ryan's business associates. This was the curtain call of farewell to Grandpa's house as they welcomed in a new chapter. Mom always enjoyed a good show. No one stopped me when I got there. A part of me always would, so I entered the front door as though I still belonged. Someone had lighted one of those ornamental candles that make an overly vain attempt to make the foyer smell like home, and it had a subtle scent of pine and cinnamon. Ryan was the first to notice me. Holding a glass of champagne, he scowled. I didn't think I'd see you. I understand, I replied. But you should listen to what I have to say. He seems amused, irritated. A small, performative grin, the same one he wore in high school when he knew a teacher wouldn't call him out, tugged at the corner of his mouth. Mom, wearing pearls and heels, drifted over. Really, Emily? Let's avoid creating a scene. Tonight is our last day together. To the residents, to the past. With gentleness, I stated, I'm not here to fight. She softened, or feigned softness. So, what is this? I extracted the envelope from inside my coat. The room fell silent, not instantly, but in that gradual group-based manner that people start to notice a change in the atmosphere. This is Grandpa's last clause, I remarked, setting the paper on the side table. An addition to his will that is legally obligatory, signed, observed, and definitely enforceable. I didn't speak louder. I didn't have to. Ryan laughed. Emily, don't, I interrupted. calmly, firmly. "Don't interrupt me, not now." He blinked. Mom appeared pale. Dad moved forward, picked up the papers, and looked over them with the tense look of a man who is aware of what he is reading and despises it. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "It is," I said. "Mr. Holloway recalls writing the draft. He has already filed to have the sale revoked. This morning the new owners were informed. There was quiet, not really dramatic, not a show, simply thick. They were overcome with a sense of helplessness that they hadn't experienced in a long time." I went on in a low voice. "I didn't do this to embarrass you. This house is more than just a place, which is why I did it. It's a pledge. And you marketed it as though it were spam." Then Sophie spoke, the only one whose voice had a hint of warmth. "How are you going to use it?" I looked over at her. "Something genuine," I uttered. "Something important." She gave a nod, silently, respectfully almost. Nobody else said anything. Not Mom, who now gazed down at her unfinished wineglass. Not Ryan, who had become unusually motionless. Not Dad, who refolded the paper as if it were going to burn him. Without another word, I walked away, because it had already been written what needed to be stated. After that night, I didn't hear from them for some time. Not an SMS message, no call, nothing. However, tranquility isn't necessarily implied by silence. Sometimes it's simply the sound of pride rearing its head in private. All my life, I had become accustomed to hearing that sound when somebody chose to ignore what they didn't want to confront, when they disregarded information that contradicted their interpretation. However, it no longer ached, not as it was. I had had enough of seeking excuses that would never materialize. I'm sick of keeping quiet just to make them feel at ease. The silence now held freedom. Stillness, yet not nothingness. Mr. Holloway attested to the fact that the sale was legally void. My name was back on the deed. Understandably incensed, the buyers threatened to sue until they determined that the sellers, not the granddaughter who enforced the condition, were the true target of their ire. I never said anything negative about my parents. I didn't have to. Their selections made a strong enough statement. The house was once more mine by the middle of January. Empty. A bit dusty. Still standing, though. The sunroom is still bright, and the hallway has a subtle hint of time. There was still Grandpa's cane hanging at the back door. That's where I left it. I put on my work clothes and started working. To honor what it signified, not to return it to its former state. Some of my senior students stopped by to assist with painting after I called in a favor. I expressed my gratitude with large thank yous, provided them with tiny checks, and offered steaming chocolate. They made no inquiries. They were not obliged to. When the afternoon sun hit just right, they observed how I gazed at the windows. As if they could still remember old hands, they noticed how I touched the doorknobs. We made a temporary studio out of the front room, brought in easels, canvases, and used chairs after clearing the floor. The yellow room is what I called it, Grandpa's preferred hue. He once told me that the color always appeared last in a painting. Because yellow's not the flash. It's the hope. The house gradually came back to life, with laughter, not with parties or shiny silver. On paper, with the gentle scuff of charcoal. Jars of paint opened with a click, by lightly guiding a brushstroke with a hand. Word got out. Without much effort, children began to arrive. Most of them are silent. Those who wrote in the margins of their arithmetic assignments, or who were quiet in class. Those who required a place that didn't grade correct, or urge them to raise their voice. What Grandpa taught me, I passed on to them. To take note of the light. To have faith in their abilities. To depict their feelings rather than how they are instructed. And by doing this, I believe I have fully grasped his point about not closing the curtains. He wasn't referring to the windows. The heart was what he meant. One afternoon, Ryan was standing on the porch when I opened it. Not a warning. No appointment. He was wearing a gray wool coat and appeared more exhausted than I had ever seen him. He did not knock immediately, simply stood there and gazed into the sunroom through the glass. Observing a child trace the border of a drawing. He didn't say anything at first when I answered the door. "You really kept it," he said. "Yes, I did." He gave a nod. "You hate us, Mom says." "I don't," I muttered. "I simply gave up hoping you would give a damn." My speech was free of animosity, just the facts, that peaceful truth that just lands without rising or falling. He lowered his gaze to his hands. "I didn't believe you would follow through." "I understand." He let out a sigh. "It was never better than you made it." I moved out of the way, allowing the door to open somewhat more. "Would you want to view the sunroom?" He paused, then he moved in carefully. Victory doesn't always appear to be winning. Standing where you were once erased and knowing that you still belong is what it looks like sometimes. That day, the light was lower, illuminating the ancient hardwood floor with long, golden fingers. Ryan's typical swagger was muted by something quieter as he moved slowly through the house with his hands in his coat pockets. Grandpa's coat, which was torn and discolored at the cuffs, was still hanging in the hallway when he stopped. He left it untouchable, simply gazed. He observed two children painting at easels in the sunroom, their heads lowered and completely absorbed. One of them raised his head and smiled slightly inquisitively. With no idea what to say, Ryan nodded back. "Her name is Lila," I muttered. "Every Tuesday and Thursday she visits. She rarely speaks. However, there are always stars in her skies." He seemed unsure whether I was being literal based on the way he looked at me. Then he gave a small smile. "This would have delighted Grandpa. It's here because of him." As if his body recalled this location, even though his mind hadn't tried to. For years, Ryan approached the window bench and sat down carefully. The ancient swing in the yard was swaying gently in the air when he peeked out. He remarked, "It's strange. I thought this house was simply old, shattered, as though we needed to grow out of it." "And?" I inquired. He took a while to respond, simply leaned back with half-closed eyelids. "I believe I was afraid of how much it could recall." Once more, that silence was full, not unpleasant. Then he whispered, "Em, do you despise me?" I gave a head shake. "No, I simply stopped counting on you to keep the things I cared about safe." He gave a nod. Nothing seemed to land as hard as that. I went on to say, "I don't expect you to understand what this place means. However, I do anticipate that you will let it go. To give in to Grandpa's wishes, what it must be for me." At that moment, he gave me a serious look. Perhaps he wasn't seeing the quiet girl who painted in corners for the first time in years. He was observing me. "I will," he declared. "I swear." I stayed behind to sweep that evening after everyone had gone and the children had gathered their belongings. It was cool. Still. The last of the amber light flowed across the room as the sun sank barely behind the trees. I took a seat by the window in Grandpa's old chair. I poured myself a cup of tea in the silence of the moment, not the sort from the shop, the one he used to prepare with a hint of honey and a blend of lavender and chamomile. I inhaled the aroma as I held it near. The note he wrote me was lying folded on the side table, its edges now frayed. I didn't have to reread it. Every word was familiar to me. The swing outside squeaked softly in the breeze. Despite being naked, the maple tree remained upright. Be patient. I closed my eyes, took a drink of the tea, and listened. The house was not empty, but it was quiet. It was alive with memories that were treasured rather than buried. I kept the light on, Grandpa, I muttered as the last of the light went out. Exactly how you requested. Then I extended my hand, and slowly, the curtain was closed.